Welcome to In the Gym with Michael Petrella. On today's show, we're going to be focusing on training neglected muscle groups. I have found that many injuries that occur in and out of the gym happen because these neglected muscle groups are not in balance with the rest of our body. They don't have the strength that some of the major muscle groups have. And by taking the time to prioritize them in our training, we're going to have safer workouts and we're going to have better results. The next thing we're going to talk about is the primary function of certain muscle groups. A lot of people are training different muscles and they have no understanding of what the actual function of the muscle is. By realizing what these functions are, we're going to be increasing our results. Finally, we're going to be talking about the role of genetics in building muscle. Some of the things we're going to be discussing may be new, they may even be controversial, but I assure you that this knowledge is going to help you understand where your training is going and the results that you can reasonably attain. So we're going to start with our first neglected muscle group, the rotator cuff. Now, you can train the rotator both externally and internally. Today we're going to show external. Most people, we find this is the weaker of the two, and this is where their injuries tend to occur. So I'm going to get Valerie to put her elbow up into the pad. Now, like every exercise, we want the axis of rotation of her body to be in line with the axis of rotation of the exercise machine. So the axis is the shoulder, and you can see we're making a straight line with the axis of the movement of the machine. So I'm just going to get Valerie to grab onto this handle. We're going to make sure that, again, she's keeping this line. Let's come down to the beginning. And she's going to be performing 8 to 12 repetitions. When you're ready, Valerie. And she's doing a great job. She's going to do both the positive and the negative, which is the lifting and the lowering, under control. And I'm just going to get you to make sure you pause at the top of each repetition. Pause. Good. If you cannot hold the repetition at the top position, then you didn't get it there in the first place. You used momentum to get it there. Keep working, Valerie. Good. You can see that she's keeping her body very stationary. Any sort of movement in the body is different muscle groups trying to take over the stress that we're trying to accomplish here in the rotator. Perfect. We have a few more here. Now I want you to keep your breathing flowing there, Valerie. Good. We're just going to do a few more. Coming up, coming up, coming up. Good. As you start to fatigue, you're going to start losing range. So we've got to keep focusing on coming right to the top. We're just going to do one more today, Valerie. Coming up, coming up. Perfect. Easing down. So that's a great demonstration. Valerie can handle more weight on this exercise, but she's showing a fantastic range of motion. It's a very simple movement. If you don't have access to an exercise machine such as this can easily be performed with a dumbbell. You can use a simple device called a shoulder horn, or you can even just put your arm up on a bar in a power rack and you're just doing the motion with a dumbbell. The next neglected muscle group that we're going to focus on are the hip adductors. Very, very common injury in power sports, hockey, football. I see a lot of injuries with the older population. They maybe haven't done anything where it's requiring them to stride out. They'll start playing old-timers baseball, and the first time they go to run the bases, they will hurt their adductors. And that's because we really don't do much in the way of exercise for them unless we take the time to exercise them directly. So we're going to use a hip adductor machine. Most gyms will have one of these. I do find that only women tend to use it. A lot of men stay away from it. This is a mistake because men need strong hip adductors just the same as women do. Your machine may allow for the legs to be straight out. Some of them are designed so the legs are creating a 90-degree angle. We do prefer to use the straight out method, but whatever you have available is what you're going to use. So I'm going to get Valerie to put her hands down. It's going to bring the movement arm together. Now, I do stress for people that the first time they do this, they probably don't have much flexibility and they also don't have much strength in the extended position. So if the machine has some sort of range limiter, in this case we have the handles that we can manually do this, I strongly suggest that you use them. So Valerie, I'm going to help her get into the top position. When you're comfortable to go, when she's ready, she's just going to ease out nice and slow. And the first couple repetitions, just right there, I don't want you to use full range. As the blood starts to move into the area, which is the groin, Then I want you to slowly start extending range. We will be creating better flexibility in the groin if this exercise is done properly. Perfect reps, nice and slow. Coming together, that's perfect. You'll notice at the top, she's trying to point her toes together. Now whether she can or cannot get her toes to touch makes no difference, but it's attempting to, that's helping her contract the muscles of her hip adductors. Good, Valerie. Keep your breathing nice and flowing. Hold. Good. We're just going to do 2 more. Again, we're always showing complete control over the weight. If you cannot hold the weight in the contracted position, you did not get it there yourself. Do 1 more rep. Good. So we're going to hold this together. She's then going to use the handles. The machine only goes so far. 1 leg out, then the other, and you're allowing your upper body to move the movement arm back. The final neglected muscle group that we're going to cover today is the tibia. Now the tibia is a very small muscle that runs on the front of your shin. When you hear about a runner getting shin splints, this is the muscle that they're talking about. It can be very painful, and a lot of the times the reason that athletes are getting this is just because it's weak. Very, very simple to strengthen, and we're going to show you a way of doing it. Now we have this very simple device that Valerie is going to hook into her feet. And the motion is just extending the toes down and then pointing them up towards the ceiling. The muscle is on the front of her shin, and we're just working it through a full range of motion. Now you'll notice she's not using a lot of weight, and even some well-developed athletes will not need a lot of weight to make this a very effective exercise if done correctly. All the motion should be in the ankle. If you were to watch her move her knees up and down, it's then her quadriceps doing the work. Get you to a few more repetitions here, Valerie. This is perfect. Again, always under control, trying to get a stretch at the bottom. This is going to increase flexibility in the ankle. Do a few more here, Valerie. Very good. Again, as the muscle starts to fatigue, she's going to have a harder and harder time trying to get to the top of the motion. Keep working. We're just going to do 2 more today, Valerie. Now, most exercises, we would be working to momentary muscular failure. Come on up. That's going to be good right there. But for demonstration purposes, we're just showing the exercise today. Again, all 3 of these muscles, they tend to represent a substantial amount of injuries that we see in athletics and even just your weekend warriors. By spending the time to prioritize them in your workouts, you're going to have a stronger body. The structural integrity of all your muscles and joints is going to be a lot greater, and we're hoping that we can prevent a lot of these injuries instead of having to rehabilitate them after the fact. When we're looking to develop a muscle maximally, we have to first look, what is the primary function of that muscle? Take the bicep, for instance. Most people believe that the primary function is flexion of the arm. This is not correct. It is actually supination of the hand and wrist. So when we're looking to elect the most muscle fibers possible, we need to train the muscle through its primary function. So Valerie, using a super forearm machine, is going to demonstrate supination of the hand and wrist. Valerie? So when we look at how this applies to curling of a weight, you are always stronger when your hand is supinated. That's why when you pronate your hand, you cannot lift as much resistance because you cannot use as much muscle fiber. This is an excellent motion to use at the end of a bicep routine. Just going to do a couple more, Valerie. Under control, holding, perfect. Perfect. Put that down. So by neglecting the primary function of a muscle, you may be neglecting some of your results. Now we're going to take a look at the primary function of the chest, and that is to adduct the arms across the midline of the body. Now many people rely on pressing movements to build up the chest, and that's fine. We certainly use pressing movements here as well. But if we're not doing exercise to adduct the arms across the midline of the body, which I said is the primary function of the chest, we're going to be limiting the results in chest development. So we're going to be using a very simple pec deck exercise. Valerie, I'm going to help you get into this. We're going to start at the top. And as she eases into the movement, you're going to notice this is full range rotational resistance for the chest. people like to think of a cable crossover movement or a pec deck movement as a finishing movement, as something they do after the heavy pressing. But the truth is, this movement can elect more muscle fibers than its linear counterpart. Get you to do a few more repetitions here, Valerie. Easing out. The other thing you'll notice is she's using a great range of motion. This can help with flexibility in the shoulders. Proper weight training should increase flexibility throughout the body, never hinder it. I'll get you to do a couple more here, Valerie. Coming up, holding, perfect. And we're just going to do one more. Perfect. Come on down. I'm going to grab the one on your left. So again, to get the maximum development out of your body, you need to learn what is the primary functions of the muscles that I'm training. With that knowledge, you can then intelligently design an exercise program to yield maximum results. I've seen a lot of programs lately, and they've been talking about allowing you to develop long, lean muscle. This has to do mostly with women. I've also seen articles of champion bodybuilders who may have a tremendous tricep program for building the biggest arms possible with some sort of special equipment or some sort of special exercise that was responsible for the results. But in all reality, it's what you were born with. So what I'm going to show you is, Drew, if you could just make a bicep, you're going to flex your arm about 90 degrees. With Drew here, his tendon to the elbow to the bicep, we're talking about an inch, maybe less. This means he has a rather large cross-section of bicep to build. Now most people, you can put this down, Drew, have roughly 2 inches of tendon there. So they have a much smaller bicep area to build. There are those who their bicep literally goes right to the joint. Without any weight training whatsoever, these people are going to have better development in the muscle. When they do weight train, they're going to find that results come much faster. This has absolutely nothing to do with their exercise program and everything to do with what they were born with. Again, looking at Drew's calf, I'm just going to get you to stand up on your toe there, Drew. You can see that he has a fairly long calf muscle. This is roughly the size of his tendon. He has the genetics to build stronger, larger calves. Some people, their calves come up literally half as far as Drew's does. They just do not have the ability to build calves almost no matter what they do. Some of the best calves in bodybuilding history, those athletes have gone on the record saying they literally did no training for them. There's even some instances where that bodybuilder had a twin brother or a twin sister that reportedly had better calves than them, and they never trained at all. Again, this is genetics. It's nothing to do with secret exercises. If someone is telling you that their program is going to develop lean, long muscles, it's a complete fallacy. Now, with reduction of body fat and development of the muscle, we can change the appearance, but we cannot change the length of the muscle. So next we're going to take a look at the bicep with Connor here. Connor, I'm going to get you to flex your arms about 90 degrees. Now, it's a little bit easier to see here with Connor because Connor is a little bit leaner. But you can see here, we got almost 2.5 inches of tendon here. We don't have the same cross-section of muscle on the biceps. So even if we were to get Connor to do the exact same exercises as Drew, he eventually will not develop the same amount of muscle. Now, the one good thing about Connor, you can put your arm down for a second. A lot of people with a longer tendon tend to be able to develop more strength. The angle of pull is better, so that is a positive. So what I'm trying to get across to people is that you have to realize that we are constrained by our genetics, but I don't want you to feel that all of a sudden you can't make development. In realistic terms, Connor should not have arms as big as Drew if they were both to develop themselves to their maximum potential. But because most people never get there, it really isn't a concern. Now we're going to take a minute and we're going to look at Connor's calves. So now looking at Connor's calves, he actually has relatively long calves. Now here's the interesting thing. His calves at this point in his training are not as large as Drew's. Drew is showing more development currently. However, his length is very similar, if not equal to Drew's. So again, we can intelligently guess that if they were to continue their training, they would reach a fairly similar maximum potential in growth here. Sticking with the theme of genetics, I want to talk a little bit about leverages when it comes to lifting weights. Now, I'm going to show both Megan and Connor doing a free weight squat. Now, you've probably heard you have to squat to get big, or the squat is the king of all exercises, or something along those lines. There's no question that a squat done properly is a very demanding exercise that works a great deal of musculature, but as I'm clearly going to show you, it's a better fit for some people. Now, we're going to show Megan first. Now, she has excellent leverages for squatting, and what I mean by that is, in general, she's got shorter femurs, and you're going to see that she has a very easy time using a full range of motion, and she can keep her body fairly vertical. I'm going to get you to do a few squats here, Megan. Yep. And you're just going to come all the way down and come all the way up. You see, she has a very easy time staying upright. Do a couple more here, Megan. All the way down. Perfect. And we're just going to do one more. Perfect. Come on into the rack. Forward, forward. Down. So when we look at Megan's squat, the first thing that becomes apparent is the actual vertical distance of the bar is not that high. Because she doesn't have to move the bar very far, she can actually use substantially more weight. Again, this has to do with their leverage. Also, when most people squat, they tend to be focusing on the legs. Because of her ability, just through her leverages, to stay upright, this does become a tremendous leg builder for her. Now looking at Connor, he's a lifter that's over 6 feet tall. And what I want you to look for is how far he has to move this bar. Let me get you to just come underneath your Connor. We're just going to do a few reps. And I want you to use a nice full range of motion. Coming all the way down. Perfect. I'll get you to just a couple more here. Perfect. Just one more, Connor. And he literally is moving this bar about twice as far as Megan is. Come on into the rack. Good. So although Connor has been able to demonstrate that he can clearly do the lift, and he can do the lift safely, this is going to be for him primarily a glute and lower back movement. If we were to use the weight that he can handle, you would notice that this bar is trying to push him more and more forward. And because of his relative height, he doesn't have the same mechanical advantage over the load that Megan has. So again, this is not to say that he shouldn't squat or he cannot squat, but realize that for him to even lift the exact same weight of Megan, the amount of work he's doing is substantially more. Also, I find with some taller athletes, it tends to hurt their knees a little bit. If any exercise is hurting any of your joints, you want to discontinue it. It's not the exercise for you. So again, to repeat, some exercises are going to be built for you and some may not be. That's it for this episode of In the Gym. I hope that the topics that we've covered inspire you to take a more balanced approach to your training. If you have any other questions or comments, please follow us on Facebook at STG Strength and Power or on Twitter at STG Gym.